The Shadows of the Winchester Estate. A narrative of deception, the story begins with the heavy scent of desperation. Millie Calloway is a woman whose past is a lead weight dragging behind her, having spent a decade behind bars for a mistake she made as a teenager. She is now a pariah in a world that demands a clean record. She lives in her car, eats cold, canned food, and waits for a miracle. That miracle appears in the form of the Winchesters. When she pulls up to their driveway, the house looks like a sanctuary, a sprawling, pristine mansion with manicured lawns and the promise of a fresh start. Nina Winchester, the lady of the house, looks like a woman who has everything: beauty, wealth, and a handsome husband. But as Millie soon learns, perfection is often a thin veil for rot. The first crack in the facade appears with the room. Millie is led not to a guest suite, but to the very top of the house. The attic room is a claustrophobic nightmare. It is small, freezing, and the window is nothing more than a slit that offers no view of the world outside. Most disturbingly, the door has a heavy bolt nut on the inside for privacy, but on the outside for containment. Millie tries to brush off the rising sense of unease. She needs this job. She needs the paycheck. She tells herself that a weird room is a small price to pay for a roof over her head. As the weeks unfold, the psychological warfare begins. Nina Winchester is not the gracious employer Millie expected. She is a whirlwind of chaos. One moment, she is gifting Millie a designer dress. The next, she is screaming at her for stealing it. Nina intentionally pours Italian dressing on the white carpets, watches Millie scrub it out on her hands and knees, and then does it again the next day. She fires Millie, then begs her to stay. She seems determined to break Millie's spirit, treating her as a subhuman intruder in her perfect life. In the midst of this atmospheric hell, there is Andrew Winchester, Andrewis, the prince of the story charmin, soft-spoken and devastatingly handsome. He treats Millie with the dignity his wife denies her. He apologizes for Nina's behavior, whispering in the kitchen about Nina's struggles with mental health and her refusal to take her medication. Millie finds herself drawn into his orbit. She sees the bruises on his spirit and begins to fantasize about a life where she isn't the maid, but the woman who saves him. The tension between them simmers, a dangerous mix of pity and attraction. Millie begins to hate Nina, seeing her as a monster who is suffocating a saintly man. But then the perspective shifts, and the ground falls out from under the reader. We enter the mind of Nina Winchester, and the reality of the house changes instantly. The colors of the narrative turn cold. We see that Nina's erratic behavior wasn't madness. It was a desperate, frantic performance. Nina is a prisoner in her own home. Andrew is not a victim. He's a master manipulator and a sadistic sociopath. The accidents and outbursts Nina staged were her only way of communicating to the outside world that something was wrong. Every time she tried to leave, Andrew found a way to drag her back, using their daughter as leverage. The most horrifying revelation is why Millie is there. Nina didn't hire Millie. Despite her criminal record, she hired her. Because of it, Nina had discovered Andrew S. Paterny would eventually tire of his current victim and move on to the next. Nina realized that if she could find a woman who was strong, desperate, and capable of violence, she might be able to redirect Andrew's malice. She chose Millie to be her replacement, hoping that when Andrew eventually turned his dark desires toward the new maid, Millie would be the one to finally kill him. Nina wasn't being cruel to Millie out of malice. She was trying to provoke her to see if Millie had the fire necessary to survive what was coming. The narrative reaches a fever pitch as Andrew's mask finally slips in front of Millie. The transition is subtle at first, a tightening of his grip, a coldness in his eyes, and then it is total. He traps Millie in the attic. The click of the outside lock, which Millie had feared since day one, finally echoes through the hallway. Inside the attic, the true horror of the Winchester legacy is revealed. Andrew reveals his plan to tame Millie, just as he did with the women before her. He believes he is the apex predator, the one who holds all the keys. But he has made a catastrophic error in judgment. He assumed that because Millie was poor and a former convict, she was weak. He didn't realize that Millie's time in prison hadn't broken her. It had forged her into a weapon. The climax is a visceral, high-stakes game of survival. While locked in the attic, Millie doesn't panic. She remembers the lessons of her past. When Andrew enters the room, expecting to find a sobbing, broken woman, he finds a hunter. The battle that follows is not just about physical strength, but about who has the more ruthless will to survive. Millie uses Andrew's own tools of torment against him, turning the attic from a prison into his tomb. In the final act, the two women, the wife and the maid, stand over the wreckage of their shared nightmare. There is no need for many words. They are bound by the blood on the floor and the shared trauma of the man who tried to own them. Nina, the strategist, and Millie, the executioner, work together to scrub the truth from the house. They weave a story for the police, a tale of a tragic accident, a husband who fell, a house of cards that finally collapsed. The story ends with a haunting sense of justice. Nina is finally free, living a life of peace with her daughter, no longer looking over her shoulder. Millie, however, cannot simply return to a normal life. She has realized something about herself. As she moves on to her next job, she carries a specific reputation. The final scene reveals Millie arriving at another grand house, hired by another woman who looks terrified of her own husband. Millie isn't just a maid anymore. She is an avenging shadow, a woman who walks into the dark corners of domestic bliss to clean up the monsters that hide there.